What if your mind could break free from the endless loop of autopilot and tap into a clarity you've only imagined? The truth is, you don't need to enroll in a master's program or meditate for hours on end. What transforms ordinary thinking into razor-sharp insight lies in 13 simple, daily choices you make, one at a time. These aren't abstract theories, they're actionable practices rooted in Stoic wisdom and proven by modern neuroscience. By questioning what you take for granted, diving into unfamiliar ideas, and carving out minutes of silent reflection, you'll forge mental habits that stack upon each other, turning scattered thoughts into deliberate power. Today, we'll uncover those 13 habits and show you exactly how small shifts in your routine can revolutionize the way you learn, solve problems, and navigate complexity. It begins the moment you decide to challenge a single assumption. Let's get started. 1. Develop a habit of skepticism and question everything. Imagine waking each morning with a glimmer of doubt in the back of your mind, an invitation rather than a burden. Skepticism needn't be cynical, rather, it is a steady lamp guiding you through shadows of assumption. When you adopt skepticism as a daily ritual, you begin by pausing before every claim you absorb, whether from news headlines, casual conversations, or even your own internal narratives. Instead of accepting that you just aren't a math person or that people won't like you if you speak up, you learn to investigate. Why do I believe that? What evidence supports it? What subtle voices, perhaps cultural expectations or childhood conditioning, whisper these stories in my ear? In Stoic philosophy, the practice of questioning aligns closely with Epictetus's teaching that it's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. By cultivating skepticism, you begin to notice that many of the judgments shaping your world are built on unexamined foundations. This shift isn't about rejecting all ideas by default. Instead, it is a method of saying, "Hold on, let me see more clearly before I commit." With practice, every statement becomes an opportunity to investigate rather than to passively swallow. When you see a headline asserting that your generation is ruining everything, you ask, who wrote this? What data backs it? What underlying assumptions drive the author's perspective? When someone repeats a rumor about a coworker, you ask, where does this story originate? Who benefits from it? And when you hear your own inner voice chastising you for a perceived failure, you treat that voice with the same scrutiny. Is this criticism founded on realistic standards, or is it a harsh echo of someone else's unrealistic expectations? Over time, skepticism evolves into a kind of mental hygiene. It clears away debris, unstated biases, inherited beliefs, and unverified claims, so that your mind becomes less cluttered and more spacious. In practical terms, this might mean writing down every assertion that tugs at your emotions and listing the evidence for and against it. It may mean setting aside 10 minutes each day to silently examine a persistent worry. Where did I first learn to fear failure? What observable evidence shows that failure is catastrophic? Often you'll find that the real reasons lie buried beneath layers of social pressure, unspoken assumptions, or emotional habits formed in childhood. As you disentangle these threads, your mind sharpens. You find yourself able to engage in conversations with greater clarity, to make decisions more deliberately, and to avoid falling prey to sensational headlines engineered to provoke outrage. Skepticism thus becomes a mental muscle you work every day. It doesn't leave you paralyzed by doubt. Instead, it equips you with the confidence to say, I need to look deeper, or I'm not convinced yet. You may learn that a popular diet isn't backed by rigorous science, but rather by marketing narratives designed to sell. You may discover that a friend's casual comment about your performance at work is more about their own insecurities than about any real flaw of yours. And most importantly, when you turn that inquiry inward, you find that many of the self-limiting beliefs you carry aren't as solid as they once seemed. As Marcus Aurelius observed, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Embracing skepticism thus initiates a lifelong journey of deepening mental clarity. Rather than wandering through life guided by others' unexamined perspectives, you learn to chart your own course, grounded in evidence, reason, and an open-minded willingness to revise your views as new information emerges. In this way, skepticism becomes less a posture of cynicism and more a practice of intellectual humility. You acknowledge that even your most cherished beliefs could be mistaken. By transforming doubt into curiosity, you render your mind more agile and resilient. When the next controversial headline flashes across your screen, you respond not with immediate outrage, but with calm inquiry. Who wrote this? What's the data? How reliable is it? Over time, this disciplined questioning rewires your mental habits, making you more aware, more critical, and ultimately more intelligent in navigating a complex world. 2. Read outside your comfort zone. Consider the last book you read. Perhaps it aligns perfectly with your existing interests, whether psychology, technology, or personal development. But what if you deliberately reached beyond that comfort? Picking up a philosophy treatise you once dismissed as too dense, or investing time in a historical narrative of a culture you knew almost nothing about, doesn't merely broaden your knowledge, it grows your neural pathways. When you dive into subjects you're unfamiliar with, your brain is forced to build new connections, much like a trailblazer carving fresh paths in a forest. The Stoics encouraged precisely this kind of intellectual expansion. Seneca warned against the narrow-mindedness of those who never stray far from their habitual readings, commenting that learning is not attained by chance. It must be sought for with ardor and diligence. By choosing to read books that challenge your assumptions, whether about economics, quantum physics, or the rituals of an obscure ancient society, you spark cognitive growth. These new mental pathways don't just add facts to your memory. They cultivate the capacity to find creative analogies and to draw unexpected lessons. For example, reading about the Byzantine Empire's fall may help you understand how complex systems collapse under certain pressures, insights transferable to modern organizational dynamics or even personal habits. When you read a memoir of someone whose life trajectory differs drastically from yours, perhaps an Olympic athlete from a war-torn region, you develop empathy and gain new perspectives on resilience and grit. And when you tackle a technical manual in computer programming, you refine your logical thinking and problem-solving skills, even if you never write a line of code beyond a few experiments. The act of deciphering unfamiliar terminology, of wrestling with new frameworks, strengthens your capacity to tackle novel challenges. To incorporate this habit, set aside at least 20 minutes each day to read something outside your usual genre. Start small if the gap seems too wide. Perhaps a short essay or a chapter of a book, rather than leaping into a 600-page tome. As you persist, you'll notice subtle shifts. Your mental stamina for difficult texts will increase, your curiosity will become insatiable, and you'll begin to see connections between disparate fields. That journalist's article on urban development might suddenly resonate with a concept you read in a neuroscience paper. Reading broadly trains your mind to be less siloed, more integrative. And crucially, it makes you more adaptable. In a rapidly changing world, the ability to learn across disciplines is akin to having a Swiss Army knife rather than a single-blade tool. Over time, as you accumulate these varied readings, your conversations gain depth. You can reference a philosophical concept to illuminate a point in a business meeting, or you can draw on literary metaphors to enrich a creative project. In embracing reading outside your comfort zone, you transform yourself into a polymath in training, constantly expanding the frontiers of your own mind. 3. Diversify your daily routine. Routine often gets a bad rap, associated with boredom or stagnation, but a more nuanced approach suggests that diversity within routine is the key. A diversified routine isn't a contradiction. Rather, it's a carefully balanced framework that mixes stability with novelty. The Stoics recognized that while consistent habits ground us, they must evolve, or else our minds become dull. Marcus Aurelius recommended that we set aside a regular time for reflection, but not at the same minute each day. Let it shift. In practical terms, this means intentionally varying small elements of your day so that your brain is continually engaged. For instance, if you always take the same route to work, try an alternative path one day each week. If you have a morning meditation ritual, occasionally switch from a guided audio to silent reflection in a different location. Perhaps a local park or even a balcony overlooking the city. By changing your environment, you spark new sensory inputs, different sounds, visual stimuli, scents, which cause your brain to stay alert rather than coasting on autopilot. Likewise, vary the order of your daily tasks. If you always exercise before breakfast, sometimes move it to after lunch or in the evening. If you listen to podcasts during your commute every day, replace one commute with 30 minutes of drawing or reading a print book. These micro changes force your mind to adapt, preventing the dullness that accompanies overly rigid routines. Over time, these variations accumulate, giving your mind fresh contexts in which to solve problems. When you alter even small details, like swapping your usual coffee blend for an herbal tea or alternating the instrumentals you listen to, your neural networks fire in novel patterns. This doesn't mean foregoing all structure, rather it means structuring your life in a way that deliberately incorporates novelty. In the evenings, for example, if you habitually wind down with a certain Netflix series, designate one night for cooking a completely new recipe while following a YouTube tutorial. That shift from being a passive viewer to an active learner awakens your problem-solving skills and fine-tunes your coordination. At work, if you typically begin by answering emails, try starting with your most challenging project instead, so that your cognitive resources are fresh when tackling complex tasks. The Stoics taught that our minds require both peace and challenge, tranquility to focus and turbulence to grow. By diversifying small elements of your routine, you keep your mind in a state of productive discomfort, where it is neither overwhelmed nor bored. Over weeks and months, this practice strengthens your adaptability. When confronted with unexpected changes, whether a sudden shift in work priorities or a personal upheaval, your mind is less thrown off course. You've rehearsed flexibility in microcosm and so can navigate larger uncertainties with composure. In effect, by diversifying your routine, you train your brain to be agile, creative, and resilient, qualities that make you smarter by improving your capacity to learn, adapt, and innovate. 4. Expand your cultural horizons. In an increasingly interconnected world, cultural exposure isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for intellectual growth. When you limit yourself to your own cultural bubble, consuming media, food, and opinions only from familiar sources, you risk developing a kind of mental echo chamber that stunts your worldview. The Stoics, though bound by their own era's limitations, understood the value of cosmopolitanism. Epictetus reminded us that we belong to a universal human community, teaching that no man is an island of a singular culture. Today, you can expand your cultural horizons in countless ways, by listening to music genres from different countries, attending multicultural festivals, sampling cuisines you've never tried, or engaging in online forums where global perspectives collide. For example, take 10 minutes each evening to watch a news segment from another country, perhaps a Japanese morning program, a French evening debate, or a Brazilian documentary on local wildlife. Even if you only catch fragments of the language, the cadence, the visual cues, and the cultural values on display give you fresh input. When you travel, whether across continents or to a neighborhood you've never visited, immerse yourself fully. Learn a few basic phrases of the local language, try cooking a regional dish, and listen to native speakers without the filter of subtitles. If travel isn't feasible, bring the world to your living room. Subscribe to international magazines, follow global thought leaders on social media, or join virtual language exchange meetups. By exposing yourself to different cultural frameworks, you begin to see how beliefs, values, and customs shape thought patterns. That perspective deepens your empathy and enriches your capacity for critical thinking. You learn to see your own cultural assumptions as just one among many possibilities. This habit not only increases your intelligence, but also prevents cultural myopia, your tendency to judge other ways of life by the standards of your own. In professional contexts, cultural literacy can be a game changer. When collaborating with international colleagues, you'll be more adept at navigating nuances in communication, knowing when directness is valued, when indirect subtleties carry more weight, or when hierarchical deference informs the flow of ideas. In personal life, cultural exposure enhances your ability to connect with diverse individuals, strengthening relationships and making you a more engaging conversationalist. Reading fiction from different cultures, say a Nigerian novel one month and an Argentine short story collection the next, teaches you about diverse human experiences, enriching your emotional intelligence. You realize that grief, joy, love, and ambition manifest differently depending on social norms, religious beliefs, and historical contexts. That revelation deepens your overall understanding of what it means to be human, making you more insightful when analyzing others' motivations. Over time, expanding your cultural horizons doesn't just add discrete facts to your mind. It reshapes your mental architecture, encouraging you to think beyond cultural borders and to question assumptions that once felt immutable. It makes your intelligence not just a measure of knowledge, but a reflection of your capacity to engage meaningfully with a rich tapestry of human experiences. 5. Learn something new every day. Learning isn't confined to formal education. It is an attitude you cultivate each morning when you promise yourself, "Today, I will learn at least one thing I didn't know yesterday." The Stoics emphasized lifelong learning. Marcus Aurelius noted that the mind that is anxious about future events is miserable, and one antidote to anxiety is the steady accumulation of competence. Each day, identify one nugget of new information, whether a fact about astronomy, a new cooking technique, or the etymology of a rarely used word. Start with a simple ritual. Before you open social media or check emails, spend 5 minutes browsing a Word of the Day app or reading a short blog post on a topic you know nothing about. You might learn how tardigrades survive extreme conditions, or how a particular chord progression in music evokes powerful emotions. That 5-minute ritual signals your brain that curiosity is part of your identity. As the day progresses, seize spontaneous learning opportunities. When you see someone knitting on your commute, ask them about the pattern. When you notice a unique architectural detail while walking down a street, look up its history later. If you encounter an unfamiliar vegetable in the grocery store, research its nutritional profile and culinary uses. The key is to treat life as an endless classroom, where every sight, sound, and interaction is a chance to expand your internal breadth. By consistently stacking these micro-learning moments, you steadily build a vast reservoir of knowledge. Within a few months, you'll find yourself recalling obscure facts, like which poets wrote during the Tang dynasty, or how certain birds navigate thousands of miles during migration seasons. These fragments aren't trivial. They become tools for analogy and creativity. When solving a problem at work, say, how to increase efficiency on a sales team, you might recall that ants organize labor by pheromone signals and consider how non-verbal cues within your own organization could be optimized for smoother collaboration. This practice also strengthens your neural plasticity, your brain's ability to form and reorganize synaptic connections in response to learning. A brain that learns something new daily remains more flexible, more capable of adapting to novel situations, and more resistant to cognitive decline. Additionally, the very act of committing to daily learning transforms your self-concept. You begin to see yourself as someone who is perpetually curious, someone open to new experiences, and someone who refuses to be intellectually complacent. That identity shift fuels further learning. Curiosity begets more curiosity, creating a virtuous cycle. To reinforce this habit, keep a journal, either digital or paper, where you jot down each day's learning highlight. At the end of the month, review these entries and notice the breadth of your newfound knowledge. That retrospective bolsters your confidence as a learner and motivates you to maintain the momentum. Over time, this habit builds not just knowledge, but a mindset, a resilient, inquisitive mind that relishes challenges and finds joy in discovery. 6. Apply what you learn. Knowledge without action is like fuel that never reaches the engine. When you accumulate insights but fail to apply them, they sit as latent potential rather than reshaping how you think and live. The Stoics insisted on praxis, the union of theory and practice. Epictetus taught that, don't just say you have read books, act as if what is contained in them is real. Each time you learn a new idea, commit to at least one small act that incorporates it. If you read about deep breathing techniques to manage stress, take 3 conscious breaths the next time you feel tension. If you learn about a novel productivity method, say time blocking, allocate a block in your calendar the same day to experiment with it. By doing this, you transform abstract knowledge into embodied skill. If you study a chapter on cognitive biases, notice one bias in action during a conversation, perhaps the confirmation bias, and call it out in your mind. Ah, there it is. In that moment of recognition, you tighten the connection between your conceptual understanding and real-world behavior. Another example. Suppose you discover a statistic about how sitting for more than 8 hours a day increases health risks. Instead of letting that fact fade, stand up every hour on the hour and stretch for a minute. Even if you work from home, set an alarm on your phone. Small acts like this, repeated daily, slowly rewire your habits and lead to significant improvements in well-being. Importantly, Applying what you learn also provides feedback loops that sharpen your judgment. When you try a new negotiation strategy gleaned from reading behavioral psychology, you observe what works and what doesn't. Maybe you learn that mirroring your counterpart's body language actually feels awkward unless done subtly. In adjusting your approach, you refine your understanding of the principle. That iterative process, learning, application, observation, and refinement, is akin to a scientist running experiments. The more cycles you complete, the more nuanced your understanding becomes, and the more effective you appear in practical contexts. This habit also combats the trap of superficial learning, where you skim podcasts and blog posts without ever integrating their wisdom. By committing to action, you root each lesson in lived experience. Even if the application fails, that failure itself is instructive. You pinpoint gaps between theoretical models and messy reality, making you a more discerning thinker. Over months and years, this practice accumulates. You become someone who doesn't just know facts. You are someone whose actions reflect that knowledge. Your habits coalesce into a portrait of a person who learns by doing, making your intelligence not just a measure of what you know, but of how effectively you adapt and innovate in life's unfolding challenges. 7. Rethink and improve routine tasks. Every day you repeat certain tasks, some mundane, others seemingly trivial. Brushing your teeth, sending routine emails, washing dishes. These tasks often operate on autopilot, sequestered in the background of your consciousness. But what if you approached even the most banal task with the intention to improve it? Stoic philosophy places emphasis on excellence in every action, no matter how small. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. By reframing routine tasks as opportunities for mastery, you shift from mindless repetition to mindful optimization. For example, when you sweep the floor each morning, ask yourself, how can I do this faster without sacrificing care? Can I adjust my posture to reduce back strain? Is there a more efficient pattern that covers more ground with fewer steps? In doing so, you enhance productivity and develop a mindset of continuous improvement. When responding to emails, instead of defaulting to generic templates, consider ways to make communication clearer and more impactful. Maybe you experiment with personalized salutations or a concise subject line that grabs attention. Over time, these refinements build your reputation as someone reliable and attentive to detail. In the kitchen, washing dishes can become a meditative practice. Notice the warmth of the water, the texture of the bubbles, the shapes of utensils. As you wash, let your mind focus on gratitude for the food you ate, the nourishment you received, and the hands that prepared the meal. By infusing everyday chores with intention, you transform them into moments of mindfulness and gratitude. This approach echoes the Stoic belief that virtue resides in the smallest actions. Each dish scrubbed well is a manifestation of diligence and presence. When you commute, especially if it involves a monotonous drive or a crowded subway, use the time to mentally rehearse solutions to problems you're facing, or to review a philosophical quotation you recently read. Rather than scrolling through social media, practice silence or mindful observation of your surroundings. Notice the architecture, the way people move, the colors on display. These small shifts train your brain to find meaning in the mundane, sharpening your observational skills and reducing dependency on constant external stimulation. By rethinking routine tasks, you also generate a sense of agency and self-mastery. You're no longer a passive actor swept along by daily demands. You become an active agent seeking excellence in every action. This habit compounds over time. Small improvements in mundane tasks free up mental energy and build confidence in your capacity to enact change. Consequently, when more complex challenges arise, you bring to them the same mindset of incremental refinement and mindful execution. 8. Play strategic games for mental fitness. Our brains thrive on challenge, especially when that challenge requires both creativity and logic. Playing strategic games, whether classic chess, modern strategy board games like Settlers of Catan, or even certain video games that involve resource management, engages cognitive functions that everyday tasks seldom require. The Stoics valued games as training for the mind. They believed that the soul must exercise against obstacles to grow stronger, a principle as true in playful contests as it is in philosophical study. Chess, for instance, is a microcosm of life's strategic dilemmas. You must anticipate opponents' moves, adapt when your plans go awry, and manage limited resources, pieces on the board, to achieve a goal. Checkmate. Over time, playing chess develops pattern recognition, long-term planning, and the capacity to balance offense and defense. Similarly, a game like Go, with its deceptively simple rules but unfathomable depth, trains your brain to think holistically, to weigh local gains against global strategy. Even puzzle games that involve spatial reasoning, like Tetris or certain Rubik's Cube challenges, enhance your ability to mentally rotate objects, fostering neural agility. Beyond abstract reasoning, strategic games develop social intelligence when played against others. Negotiation games, such as diplomacy or certain trading card games, require reading opponents' intentions, forming alliances, and sometimes sacrificing short-term gains for long-term advantage. Those social dynamics mirror real-life interpersonal challenges. When do you cooperate? When do you betray a partner? How do you recover when trust is broken? By immersing yourself in these mental exercises, you strengthen neural circuits associated with cognitive flexibility, working memory, and strategic foresight. The habit of playing strategic games need not be time-consuming. Even 20 minutes a day sharpens your mind. You might integrate a short chess puzzle into your morning routine, or dedicate a Sunday afternoon to a board game with friends. In an era dominated by passive screen time, consciously choosing games that challenge your intellect is akin to selecting a high-nutrient meal over empty calories. Over months, you'll notice that problem-solving in other domains, work projects, personal decisions, becomes more fluid. You recognize patterns faster, generate creative solutions, and maintain composure when plans shift. In moments of stress, you remember to consider multiple scenarios before committing to a path, much like evaluating potential moves on a game board. This cognitive rigor spills over into real life, making you not just entertained, but incrementally smarter. 9. Increase your mental intensity. We often equate intellectual growth with slow, steady absorption, reading a book, listening to a lecture, attending a workshop. But there's another dimension, the intensity with which you engage deeply with ideas. Mental intensity is that state in which your full attention zeroes in on a single concept or problem, excluding all external distractions. The Stoics practiced concentration as a form of discipline. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break. It stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." In modern terms, increasing mental intensity involves creating conditions for deep work. Designate specific blocks of time. ideally when your energy is highest, such as early morning, during which you eliminate notifications, silence your phone, and close unrelated browser tabs. Choose one cognitively demanding task: reading a dense philosophical article, writing an essay without reference to outside sources, or coding a complex function without resorting to autocomplete. Set a clear goal for that block. Perhaps to summarize the article's arguments in your own words, critique its premises, or generate 3 novel applications of a principle you've just learned. The key is to resist urges to multitask. Neuroscience shows that shifting attention between tasks incurs a switching cost that impairs working memory. By sustaining focus for extended periods, say 90 minutes of uninterrupted work, you push your prefrontal cortex to adapt to deeper levels of concentration. Over time, your capacity for mental intensity grows. You'll find you can read longer without zoning out, write more complex essays without banging against writer's block, and solve intricate problems with fewer interruptions. This heightened focus also improves your capacity to notice subtle details, nuances in a philosophical argument, overlooked errors in code, or implicit biases in a dataset. To cultivate this habit, track your deep work sessions in a journal. Note the duration, the tasks accomplished, and the mental state you achieved. Celebrate days when you maintain an unbroken flow for over an hour. When interruptions inevitably arise, a colleague dropping by your office, an urgent email, practice politely deflecting. "I'm in the middle of something important. Can it wait until time?" This simple assertiveness preserves your mental space. Over weeks and months, your threshold for mental intensity expands, making you more efficient at high-level thinking. Moreover, this training builds mental resilience. When life becomes chaotic, you'll be better equipped to carve out focused time because you've practiced fiercely defending your concentration. In a world of constant distraction, increasing mental intensity is a superpower that makes you not just smarter, but also more creatively productive. 10. Engage in productive hobbies. Hobbies are often thought of as leisure activities, a way to relax and escape from work. But when chosen mindfully, hobbies can also be engines of intellectual growth. A productive hobby is one that stimulates learning, creativity, and skill development, rather than merely consuming your time. Consider, for example, learning a musical instrument. Practicing guitar or piano involves a blend of auditory processing, fine motor skills, memory, and emotional expression. It challenges your brain to integrate sensory inputs with motor outputs, forging new neural pathways. After a few months of practice, you not only can play melodies, but your brain's auditory cortex and motor regions are better connected, an effect that spills over into improved language learning and coordination. Painting or drawing is another productive hobby. Translating what you see onto paper demands heightened observation, spatial reasoning, and patience. When you attempt to capture the subtle play of light on a still life, you learn to notice gradations of color and shadow that you'd never noticed before. That heightened perceptual skill enriches not just your artwork, but also your general capacity for noticing details in everyday life. For those less artistically inclined, woodworking or DIY electronics projects can be equally enriching. As you assemble a wooden box or wire a simple circuit, you learn to visualize structures in 3 dimensions and to cultivate a practical understanding of physics. Each misstep, cutting a piece of wood too short, soldering 2 wires incorrectly, teaches you a lesson that sticks because it's tied to hands-on experience. Gardening, too, can be a productive pastime. Tending plants requires learning about soil chemistry, seasonal cycles, and horticultural techniques. When you observe how different plants respond to changes in water or light, you develop a nuanced understanding of ecosystems, insights that can apply to broader systems thinking. And, if your hobby is writing, whether journaling, storytelling, or blogging, you deepen your mastery of language and refine your ability to express complex thoughts with clarity. To make a hobby maximally productive, set goals and track progress. If you play the piano, learn a specific classical piece within 3 months rather than just practicing randomly. If you take up programming, aim to build a small app that solves a real problem rather than merely following tutorials. By aligning hobbies with measurable objectives, you harness your leisure time for cognitive growth. Additionally, sharing your hobby with a community, joining a local orchestra, a painting class, or an online woodworking forum introduces collaborative learning. You receive feedback, learn from others' mistakes, and witness diverse approaches to the same challenge. That social dimension enriches your perspective, broadening your understanding of techniques and styles. Over time, productive hobbies become more than weekend diversions. They become integral parts of your identity. You're not just someone who likes to draw. You're a budding artist who thinks in terms of proportion, shading, and color theory. That identity shift boosts your confidence and makes you more open to tackling unfamiliar domains. The excitement of learning to play a new chord or to weld 2 pieces of metal sparks the same neural reward systems that drive you to seek new information more broadly. In this way, productive hobbies not only enrich your life with skills and creative satisfaction, but also supercharge your intelligence by continually challenging your brain to learn, adapt, and innovate. 11. Surround yourself with smarter people. The company you keep exerts a profound influence on your intellectual growth. When you spend time with individuals who challenge you, through insightful conversation, constructive critique, or by setting high personal standards, you're more likely to stretch beyond your current capabilities. The Stoics recognized the power of companionship in cultivating virtue. Epictetus taught that associate with the wise and only the wise. While wisdom in his era often referred to moral excellence, today we can interpret the wise as those who continually seek knowledge, who hold themselves to high intellectual standards, and who inspire others to think more deeply. To surround yourself with smarter people, begin by identifying those in your network whose opinions you respect. Mentors, colleagues, or even acquaintances whose curiosity and integrity you admire. Invite them to discuss books you're reading, to debate philosophical questions, or to brainstorm solutions to projects you're wrestling with. When you notice a local lecture or meetup on topics you find intriguing, attend and make an effort to mingle with those who appear engaged and thoughtful. Online communities also offer fertile ground. Forums dedicated to deep discussions, whether on philosophy, specialized sciences, or complex strategy games, allow you to engage asynchronously with diverse perspectives. The key is to participate actively, ask probing questions, share your own insights, and remain open to feedback. Over time, your circle of influence becomes a crucible of intellectual ferment. As you tackle challenging ideas, you receive pushback that illuminates blind spots. Friends who are experts in their fields can translate complex concepts into accessible language, accelerating your learning curve. When you struggle with writer's block, a friend who writes daily can share strategies to overcome it. If you're developing a new habit, someone who's already succeeded can offer accountability and practical tips. Importantly, Align yourself with people whose values resonate with your own. If you value curiosity and empathy, seek out those who exemplify those traits. Avoid relationships that drag you into petty gossip or unproductive negativity, as those dynamics sap mental energy. Instead, gravitate toward those who spark enthusiasm, who ask hard questions, and who celebrate intellectual humility over ego-driven posturing. When you gather with a small group for a weekly think night, perhaps tackling a philosophical text in rotation, you cultivate a culture of shared learning. Each member brings unique expertise. One might be well-versed in neuroscience, another a historian of ancient cultures, and another a practitioner of mindfulness. These varied lenses allow you to see a topic from multiple angles, deepening your understanding in ways solitary study cannot. Over time, these relationships form a virtuous circle. As you grow smarter, you attract even more intellectually stimulating company, and their progress in turn motivates you to keep learning. In essence, surrounding yourself with smarter people doesn't just provide you with information. It helps you develop the norms, habits, and mindset that sustain lifelong intellectual growth. 12. Exercise regularly. It's easy to regard exercise as purely a physical endeavor, a way to sculpt your body or boost your metabolism. Yet modern neuroscience makes it clear that physical activity is one of the most powerful catalysts for brain health and cognitive performance. The Stoics, though lacking scientific data, intuitively understood that a sound mind resides in a sound body. Seneca wrote, "Your body is meant more for activity than for rest," recognizing that movement sharpens the mind. Today, we know that regular exercise floods the brain with neurotrophic factors, proteins that promote neuronal growth and synaptic plasticity. Logic puzzles become easier to solve after a brisk walk, and complex decisions feel less daunting following a vigorous workout. When you exercise, you increase blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive center responsible for attention, planning, and decision-making. This boost enhances your capacity for sustained focus, helping you maintain mental intensity when tackling cognitively demanding tasks. To integrate regular exercise as a habit, find an activity you genuinely enjoy, whether it's running along a scenic trail, dancing to your favorite music, practicing martial arts, or swimming laps at the local pool. Consistency matters more than intensity. Aim for at least 30 minutes of moderate activity 5 times a week. On days when high-intensity exercise feels out of reach, a gentle yoga session or a brisk walk still yields cognitive benefits. If you have a sedentary job, incorporate short movement breaks every hour. Do 10 squats, go up and down a flight of stairs, or simply march in place for 2 minutes. These micro-workouts prevent your body from entering a lethargic state and keep your mind alert. Many people find that their best ideas emerge during exercise, when the hum of cardio or the rhythm of resistance training frees the mind from ruminative loops. Use that time to contemplate a challenging problem. Perhaps let your thoughts wander to an essay you need to write or to a project you're planning. You might find that insights crystallize more easily when your body is in motion. Over months, the cumulative effect of regular exercise transforms not only your physique, but also your cognitive resilience. You're less susceptible to stress-induced mental fog. You sleep more deeply, which consolidates memories and fosters learning. And you approach intellectual work with greater energy and clarity. Thus, by committing to regular exercise, you honor the Stoic ideal of caring for your entire self, body and mind unified, thereby enhancing your capacity to think, learn, and innovate. 13. Practice quiet time and introspection. Amid a world clamoring for attention, notifications, news alerts, and endless streams of content, quiet time becomes a rare and precious habit. The Stoics famously set aside periods for solitude and reflection. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often retreated inward to examine his own judgments, actions, and underlying motivations. By carving out deliberate pockets of silence each day, you cultivate the inner space necessary for deep introspection. Begin by designating at least 15 minutes each morning before the day's demands, purely for quiet reflection. Sit in a comfortable position, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. Let thoughts come and go without judgment, simply noting them as passing clouds. Avoid the urge to analyze immediately. Instead, cultivate a receptive awareness. After a few minutes of settling, ask yourself a targeted question. What emotion am I carrying into today? Or, which assumption about myself might be limiting my happiness? Let your mind explore without rushing to quick answers. If a strong feeling arises, anxiety, excitement, resentment, notice its physical sensations. Is your chest tight? Are your shoulders tense? By acknowledging these sensations, you create a bridge between body and mind, deepening your self-awareness. Over time, this habit of introspection becomes a steady lens, allowing you to identify cognitive distortions and emotional triggers before they hijack your day. If you notice habitual worry about what others think, you can pause and remind yourself of Stoic teachings, that other people's judgment is not within your control, and focus instead on what is. Quiet time also invites creative insights. When your mind isn't rushing to the next task, it's free to make connections between previously unlinked ideas. Perhaps a solution to a work-related challenge surfaces out of nowhere, or you recall a recent conversation and suddenly see a pattern you missed. The stillness acts like fertile ground where seeds of insight can sprout. For many, incorporating introspection means some initial discomfort. Silence can be unsettling when you're used to constant stimulation. You might face anxieties or regrets you've long suppressed. Yet, Stoic practice teaches that confronting these inner shadows is an act of courage. When you shine the light of awareness on negative self-talk, "I'm not good enough," "I'll never succeed," you expose its baseless roots, weakening its power. Over time, introspection builds emotional resilience. You become less reactive because you've practiced observing your emotional landscape without immediately acting on it. You notice anger as it emerges, see its triggers, and choose to respond calmly rather than lash out. In this way, quiet time isn't passive. It's an active cultivation of mental agility. As a final step in your introspection, close each session by setting a clear intention. Today, I will treat setbacks as feedback, not catastrophes, or I will listen twice as much as I speak. Anchoring your day with such intentions aligns you with Stoic virtues, courage, wisdom, temperance, and reminds you that the ultimate purpose of quiet time is not mere rumination, but transformation. Over weeks and months, practicing quiet introspection enhances your emotional intelligence, deepens self-knowledge, and provides the mental clarity needed to learn effectively. You become someone who can navigate life's complexities with calm deliberation, a hallmark of true intelligence. In embracing these 13 habits, skepticism, reading outside your comfort zone, diversifying routine, expanding cultural horizons, daily learning, applied knowledge, improving routine tasks, strategic games, mental intensity, productive hobbies, surrounding yourself with wiser peers, regular exercise, and quiet introspection, You don't just accumulate information, you transform the very way your mind operates. Each habit interlocks with the others, creating a synergistic framework. Skepticism primes you to question assumptions from your readings. Reading broadly fuels the curiosity that drive productive hobbies. Productive hobbies sharpen the mental intensity that enhances strategic games. Strategic games hone the problem-solving you apply to routine tasks. And regular exercise sustains the mental resilience needed for uninterrupted focus and honest introspection. Practicing these habits consistently cultivates a mind that is not only informed, but also agile, creative, disciplined, and wise. You become adept at navigating complexity, seeing patterns where others see chaos, and adapting swiftly to new challenges. As the Stoics believed, true intelligence isn't measured by rote memorization of facts, but by the capacity to live virtuously and respond to life's inevitable uncertainties with equanimity and insight. When you integrate these habits into your daily life, you forge a path towards sustained intellectual growth, unlocking potentialities you may have never imagined. In a world that bombards you with distractions, embracing these practices offers a roadmap to a sharper, more resilient mind, one that can think clearly, act purposefully, and flourish amidst the challenges of modern life.